Hey everybody, welcome to the Marty's video just went away. Uh, can you see that on the Skype chat? This is terrible. As soon as I went live, Marty's video says press camera button to prepare for movie shooting. Yeah,
What?
I don't know what happened. I'm getting a stream from you, but
Make sure you're
there
NDI.
you are. Now you're
Wow.
back. Well, off to a good start. So, welcome to our top 10 CCG discussion. Thanks everybody for joining, those of you that are on here now. The first thing we want to clarify, because Marty warned me and I didn't listen, is when we talk about CCGs, I mean collectible card games, but really it's going to include a little bit bigger of a bubble than that. It's going to include LCGs and things in that nature. So collectible card games, constructible card games, configurable card games. I don't know whether C we could throw in there. But, any games where you kind of deck build beforehand and then you go and play a deck and not necessarily competitive. There might be a co-op one show up here or something like that. So maybe co-opable card games. It could be another acronym. So welcome Marty and Matt. How's everybody doing?
Doing fantastic. I'm excited about this.
I'm excited.
Doing great.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I was working on this list to do like just a video on, and then Marty and his podcast with Tony released their top 5, and I said, "Oh, I was just working on my top 10 list." He says, "Well, let's do live stream." So we started chatting, and we got Matt involved because we had started chatting a couple of weeks ago in our little group chat on kind of the strength of the Ashes Reborn. I don't remember what the name of that thing actually is. Ashes 1.5. And we started kind of just listing off CCGs and TCGs and everything. And I was like, I think I can get a top 10 list out of this. And I got up to, honestly, like number 8. And then I was like, then I stretched it. So I got to 10. But yeah, so we've just been excited about the new Ashes. And then we just been reminiscing about all our stuff. So unless you guys have anything else you want to say, let's just jump into it. We'll try to keep this at around 2 hours or less, hopefully.
Okay.
But
Sounds good.
yeah, so let's just jump right in. We'll kind of look at the chat. Oh, I wanted to mention we will look at the chat a little bit for questions, but we'll kind of let them slide, and I'll just kind of try to consume them as we go, and we can have some more formal QA thing at the end because it'll just get kind of confusing as we go through the list. So let's start with Marty. You do your number 10.
All right. I will say that as a caveat, I love card games. To me, I view tabletop games like this. Tabletop games is like an umbrella for everything, and underneath I have different categories. I have miniature games, RPGs, board games, and CCGs.
Yeah.
So, and of those 4, this is by far my favorite, which is why I'm excited. So, I will say that looking over y'all's list and my list, I have some very obscure stuff compared to y'all because I got into CCGs almost 20 years ago. And the first one on my list is, Joel, you may be interested in, was the first Warhammer game that I ever played, which was a game called Warcry from Sabretooth Games. It was a CCG. And one thing that I absolutely loved about this game, most of these games that I picked are for a certain reason. Number one, I don't know if you see. By the way, I went down in the basement and pulled out samples of all these games that I used to play.
Nice.
And I was surprised that I find them, but the art on some of these things are just incredible. But what I loved about this game is one of the first games I played where location mattered. So in the Joel in the miniatures game, you had rank and file, right? You had trays. Yeah. You had the same sort of thing with cards. You had a front row and you had a back row. And so you could protect people by putting them in the back row, and you put your archers in the back row and your footmen on the front, etc. After that was just basic combat, but it had a really cool mechanic of when you resolve an attack at the bottom, you'd flip over the next card, and at the bottom there was a die number, and that was your modifier to make it a little bit random. So number 10 for me is Warcry came out in 2003. It's one of the first games where I became a judge of a CCG.
Oh wow!
And loved
it. Get deep into the nerddom there.
Yep.
Well, Marty, you gotta bring that to a con or something one of these days, and I'll happily play a game with you because I like the miniature game Warcry. So I feel like I gotta try this at least once or twice to get a sense of it. So we're just gonna move right along here. Now we're gonna go to me next. My number 10 is actually much higher. on Matt's number 10 list. So we're going to skip me for right now. And then Matt, you're going to go ahead and give us your number 10.
All right, my number 10 is the Final Fantasy TCG, the trading card game. This one initial drew me in. The theme, I've been playing Final Fantasy games like through my whole life, through my childhood and everything. So the theme obviously pulled me in. Lots of great artwork, and the game encompasses like all of the games, like the early NES games, and there's like 8-bit characters on some of the cards, like all the summons and the monsters and stuff that you'd encounter in those games. And they all thematically work like they do, in the games, which is really cool. Also, they have kind of a cool. It's got a 2-lane system, kind of like you were talking about, Marty, with like the front and the back. There's I'm trying to get the names right here. Forgive me if I missed some of them, but there's like the backup, which is like your back lane, and that's all your supports and stuff like that you use to basically provide resources to pay for your forwards. And your forwards do all your attacks. And your blocking and stuff. And what's fun about that is like your forwards have these power abilities, these power levels, and they're like 8,000 or 9,000. So when you go to do an attack, it's like, all right, I'm attacking you with Cloud and this guy, and all right, that's 15,000 damage coming to you. It's just like it's just a round number, right. But it was a fun way, like you're throwing huge numbers around, and that was pretty cool. And I like it's a really simple concept. Like it's basically like you have a damage stack, and if you don't block a hit, you take a card off the top of your deck and put it in your damage stack. And there was an interesting mechanism where, like, if you one of those cards off your deck, if it had an EX on it, it would trigger a special ability. So even while you're like taking damage, you can have these like retaliatory abilities kick off and stuff. So it was kind of cool. That kind of married with the Final Fantasy theme really did it for me. And it's fun to collect too, right? I got to say, as I'm getting into my list, you're going to see the collectability fun is definitely a part of the enjoyment for me a little bit with some of the games. Like the Final Fantasy had like 14 card booster packs, and there was always a holo foil, and the art was always pretty. Right. And anyway, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was actually a pretty decently played game around here, and I always had that temptation to jump into it. But the two main shops in my area, everybody really seemed to dig into that, but I never got around to trying it. So again, if you can bring that to a con, I want to give it a shot.
Sure, yeah. I got a lot of it, so.
All right, so to recap, we have Marty's number 10. I'm going to show here this little list. We're going to build this up as we go here. So we got Marty's. We're going to skip mine because it's going to show up higher in Matt's list. And then Matt here, obviously, was Final Fantasy. So we're going to do kind of a round robin or Snake or Catan style. And I know Marty wants to talk about this next one anyway. So Matt, you're number 9.
Yes, my number 9 is a Game of Thrones, the card game LCG, I guess, first edition, right? I didn't actually play the one that came out back in, was it 2014, 2015? So this was the same as very similar mechanically to the original CCG that the game started as, and then, Marty, maybe you know a little bit more about this. It like blended into an LCG at one point, right?
Yeah, so the CCG, the collectible game with booster packs, came out in 2002. Okay. And from that, I think that was Fantasy Flight's first LCG game, was the first edition of Game of Thrones.
Yeah, that sounds right. And yeah, I collected a ton of that because this was sort of my first delve into a card game since like the old like Magic the Gathering collectible card game days. And so it was like, whoa, this is a living card game. I don't have to buy booster packs. I get exactly what I want. So naturally I bought like almost everything and had like 4,000 cards in a giant library, but like, of course, like, oh yeah, it's not collectible. But the game was awesome because it was right when the Game of Thrones TV show was coming out. So I had started reading the books, and the theme is awesome. Like all the cards are super thematic.
Yeah.
But it's a crazy complex mess of a game in like the best way, right? Like there's 7 phases. You got a 60 card deck. 3 different types of attacks, right? You got your military attack, right. And if you win that, like depending on how much you win by, they have to eliminate X number of their people. Intrigue, you have to discard X number of cards from your hand if you lose that challenge. And then there's what's the last one? Power, where you, like that, yeah, the whole mechanic was about getting a certain amount of power by the end of the round, and so like the power thing would just directly steal power from them or gain you power. It was wild. It was a complex game, and I can't speak to the second edition of it, but I played the heck out of the first edition, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I only actually go ahead, Marty. Go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
No, actually, I jumped in on the second edition of LCG, and I really liked it. The way I like to play it, and I didn't get a chance to play it too much, was multiplayer. Was actually really cool because you had this kind of like alliance shifting kind of thing, which was really different for collectible or tradable, whatever card game. So that was really neat. It was, like you said, it was kind of a mess, but I liked how you had those different avenues to attack, either like attack their hand or the health of their characters and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that all fit really well into the theme of the game and the the books and stuff like that. So it was really cool to see all those things kind of married together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I played the CCG, and the reason why I didn't play the LCG because I got ticked off that I spent all this money on this card game, and every card I had was now obsolete. And I remember, so Tony and I and another guy played, and it's like, nope, that's it. I'm done. I'm not buying all these cards again. So, but it was an amazing game because it did support multiplayer, and my wife Vanessa got so into the art, everything of it. She started reading the books because we were playing the game. And then, so when a character would come up, I was like, "Tell me about this Lannister person." She's, "Oh, they're bad. They're bad. You don't want to play as them." So, it was fun around the house. So that was my first ever diving into that world. And then Vanessa actually read the books and everything from there. So,
very cool.
Nice. All right. So my number 9, I finally get to pick one now, is going to be, surprise, Magic the Gathering. So this one creeped on my list. Like I said, my number 1 through 8 were really strong, and my number 9 and 10 were a little bit soft. I really used to love Magic the Gathering. I played a ton of Magic the Gathering online. I didn't really get into it until, probably after 2000, 2001 and there. And then I met some new friends at the time, and they had it, and we had some big, huge, like 3-headed giant games. Or maybe I think we played a 4-headed giant one. We took one of my giant paintings off the wall, and we all played on like this huge table, and it was so much fun. And one of the best gaming memories I ever had was just all of these decks that were all just going against each other. And so I don't want to like neglect the amount of fun and good times I've had with it, playing in tournaments at the shop or just random games and all those online games, but the whole land stuff and the Mana Screw part of it, the things that people always talk about, just kind of knocks it down the list. Even though this really should be the number 1 because it's been around. It was the original. It's still around. There's still a thriving scene. They seem to do some, holding out of their hand for the casual players to still play it, right? Like you don't have to play it competitively and be in a tournament to enjoy the game. You can still play it 1,000 different ways. They've got those popper cube draft decks that you can build up, and you can go build a fun little cube drafting engine for like $20 and play that 100 times. And so it just, I had to like at least give it a mention on my list somewhere, because I think a lot of these games are actually, they've all stood on top of Magic, and I think they are better designs. At least the ones on my list, in my opinion, obviously, I think are better. But I still wanted to kind of just give a little tip of the hat to it at some point. So this is, I had so much fun with it, I couldn't just neglect it.
So what's funny is that means if it's, we're talking about it now, that means nobody else had it on their list. And,
yes.
None of these games would exist without that game. It was just one of those that I played a little bit, I dabbled, but I played a lot of other different things besides that one. So it deserves all the kudos for us even being here and talking about this. So 100% respect for Magic.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. I think what the modern age of Magic now, I probably wouldn't have ever fallen out of it in the same way. Like I played it for a little bit when I was a kid, but then it was like by the time I was, I'd go to play with other friends, and they just had these massive collections with like all these cards I've never seen and all these mechanical things I didn't understand. And so it was just like, I'm in over my head. It's too late to get into this. That's obviously not an issue now. Like they've completely, like you said, they made it casual friendly. They made it competitive friendly. It's really a masterpiece of design, honestly.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All right, so that's my number 9, Mr. Magic. Marty, your number 9.
Okay, so first, why didn't y'all tell me before we started that I had my focus tracking thing left on my camera?
Oh, I didn't.
And I forgot to turn that off.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I didn't notice that.
Now I've got this blot going around my head right now, and I forgot to turn it off this stupid camera.
Can't you turn it off? Can you turn it off now, or is it too late?
I will turn it off. I'll have to turn mute my camera, then I'll turn it off in a second when y'all talk about it.
I thought it was my software doing that.
Yeah, that's it's not me. It's all on your side. Okay, so one of my favorite MMOs of all time was a game called City of Heroes. So naturally, when a game came out, I believe it was Alderac from AEG, who is still around, came out with the City of Heroes CCG. Naturally, I had to get into it. So I was all into this game because you could play as heroes in Paragon City, but they introduced this really cool thing called a timing mechanic. An example of this is like this on this card right here, where it has like a two. What you do is whenever you use a power, you rotate the card either 45, 90 degrees or 180 degrees or whatever that is, plus another 90. And at the end of each turn, you get to reset 90 degrees till it's back up again and it's cooled down. Then you can use it again. So it's this really cool mechanic of activating powers that existed just like in the game. But then, just like in the game, there were these booster powers that you could have to recharge your powers quicker. The same can be applied to these. You can apply a booster to them so they recharge twice as fast. So it's just a really neat mechanic that they introduced into this game that, because of that unique mechanic, I had to make it my number 9 and just my love of that game, the MMO.
Nice. Yeah, I also enjoyed that MMO quite a bit back in the day. But never got a chance to play the card game. That mechanic may or may not be showing up in kind of a different way later on the list.
Right.
I know which one you're talking about, and yes,
yeah, it's kind of the same.
When we played that, it reminded me of this.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to recap our number 9s here real quick. Since we did Matt first, we're going to do Matt number 9. Oops, I already showed his. And then my number 9. My number 10 is blank in case you're joining late because it's higher on Matt's list. And then we're going to show Marty's number 9 here. All right. So since we're going to stick with Marty, and I think we're going to go to Marty's number 8. Yes, we are.
All right. So here we go. The first Lovecraftian themed game I ever played wasn't Arkham Horror or anything from FFG. It happened to be a game from Wizards of the Coast called Hecatoon. And this was a game that with a card, there was a CCG, and there were 5-sided cards. And what was so cool about these cards is you may notice that they have the edges are transparent.
Oh, whoa.
And with these cards, what you do is you have minions. Let me find 2 examples here. And you have what they call abominations, and you stack them on top of each other. So, like Mystic Veil, how you stack cards on top of each other? That reminds me totally of this because as you stack, the abomination gets more powerful. And you notice down here in the bottom, it's see-through at that very bottom part. If you play a minion beneath it that happens to match the same color, then that power is activated. So it's this concept of as you build this abomination, you attack, and there's like these numbers along the edges. It's strength. When you're attacked, damage is dealt from the top down, so it kills minions from the top. But then your goal to win the game is to gain 20 power. And if you're able to attack the game player, as opposed to Magic where you're dealing direct damage, what you do is you steal power from them based on the size of your abomination. So it has nothing to do with the strength. It's the more you have stacked on here, the more power you steal if you happen to get through. And it was one of the first games, this is from Wizards of the Coast, where there was no mana screw, in that any card could be a mana. You just take it and put it face down like this. That counts as a red mana. Oh. This would count as a green mana, and then you tap them in order to play your play cards and put them into play. So I went and rewatched the video on how to play this game last night, and I forgot how much I love this game.
Wow,
that's really cool.
I never heard of that. It's so unique for sure.
And this was my most proud rare because it was extremely hard to find. It was Cthulhu. So nice. All the gods were the rare ones.
Nice.
And I didn't realize this, but this was designed by Mike Elliott.
Oh,
really?
There you go. Let's see. Okay, so that was your number 8. I'm going to be probably quiet for a while. My number 8 is higher on, I think, Marty's list. Yes, it is. So we're going to skip my number 8, and we're going to go to... Okay, so Matt's number 8 is higher on my list. So we're going to skip that.
Skip that,
and then we're going to go... Now we're going to start on the 7s. So I'm not going to update the list because there's only one thing. So we're going to go to Matt's number 7.
And I'm going to try to fix my camera.
Go for it.
All right. Yeah, Marty won't want to listen to this one. So, my number 7 is Keyforge. I know.
I'm gonna fix my camera too. No.
as much as I enjoy like CCGs and LCGs, the deck building part can kind of be, a little bit of a burden for me sometimes. Like,
for sure.
Right, like, so sometimes I just want to get out and play the game, and I think Keyforge obviously takes that to 11, like completely removes all deck building. So I mean, I can see that being kind of a bummer, but like, I thought the gimmick was really cool. I had a couple dozen decks, I think, or a dozen plus decks. It's just fun to just play a deck over and over again, trying to find like a secret thing, and whatever you had, it was unique. No one in the world had that deck that you had, and the kind of cool way that they randomize stuff or procedurally generated stuff, and you could even have those crossover like super rares, so you could have something from a different house appear in a different house. Basically, you could have a house crossover card as a super rare in your deck, and have something even, like, I don't want to say even more unique. That doesn't make sense, but you know what I'm saying. Like, you can have a card that shouldn't even belong in this house. Right. In this house, and that's just, it was really neat to just have a deck that no one else in the world could have. And hey, man, let's pick up. I mean, I did that multiple times where we just pick up a couple of decks, fight against each other, and I want to keep playing this one. This one's got some cool tricks, I bet.
Right.
I understand all the complaints, totally get the criticisms, but for me, it was a fun game, and I enjoyed it. And I hope to. I've got a bunch of stuff in a box. I don't really want to get rid of it. I'll probably hang on to it for a while.
Yeah, I did enjoy like the exploratory side of it, because that's kind of neat. Because you, instead of like tinkering and theory crafting with that game, you had to like play it and play it out to see what the deck would give back to you. And so there was a lot of fun in that. My only sort of gripe with it was, it seemed like after the first few plays of it, we tended to have plays that were sort of grindy. And it's just like a random thing. Like, you can have great, amazing matchups. Like, I've had a great time with the game where it's real exciting, it's down to the wire and all that stuff. And then on the other side, I've had like, two decks that just are both slow and just super methodical and all that stuff. But yeah, but it's definitely worth picking up a few packs of that for sure.
Yeah, so, I see somebody mentioning the fact that it's not a CCG. I get that. It's
close enough.
The CCG part is buying more decks, right? You're collecting decks instead of collecting cards to build decks.
Right.
That's pretty much my jam.
Yeah, why not? Okay, so that was your number 7. Is Marty back yet? Is his camera still broken? It is.
Yes, my camera's still. Oh, I think I got it.
There
Hold
it
on.
is.
Hold on.
As soon as Matt's done.
That worked out well for you, Marty. You didn't have to comment on Keyforge at all.
Yeah.
So, I had the mic muted, but I heard everything. So yes, I played Keyforge and really enjoyed it too. But I got kind of tired. It's like, I really want a deck that has this, but I don't feel like chasing it anymore.
Yeah. Totally get it.
Yeah. So my number 7 is also higher on Matt's list. So we're going to skip me again. And we're going to go back to the realm of obscurity with Marty's number 7.
Hey, hold on now. Okay, it is very obscure. This is the last obscure one, though. This is it. So, also the time I was playing all those other weird games like Hecatomb in 2005, the year before I was playing another game from AEG, like City of Heroes, called Spycraft. And so I don't know if y'all remember there was an RPG Spycraft. I don't know if you've ever remember that one.
I don't remember that one.
Okay, so anyway, so there's this whole Spycraft thing, which is kind of what it sounds like. You're playing as spies. There's espionage and everything like that. There's the art on these cards weren't that great, but they had this really cool multiplayer mechanic, which we were looking for at the time, to where your goal was to complete missions. And you had these mission cards that were in the middle of the table, and anytime you attempted a mission, other people would try to join in to stop you from completing that mission. If you achieved your mission, you would earn something, and if somebody successfully defended against it, you would earn something. But like Game of Thrones, there were different things you could fight over. There was like combat, there was crafting, there was intrigue or something like that. But anyway, there was these different things that you could use where the different spies had different abilities. It's not almost like Mission Impossible. There's a good guy at fighting, there's a good guy at tech, that sort of thing. So it had the same sort of thing, and so because of that, it was always kind of a love of ours. And I've actually gone back to AEG and I said, would you ever consider releasing this game again? But I don't think they have the rights to Spycraft anymore. So they couldn't do it.
Sounds cool.
My last obscure one.
All right. So let's recap, because we're going to start to unlock some of mine finally here. So we got, okay, my number 8 was higher, and Matt's number 8 was higher. So Matt's number 7 was Keyforge, just to recap. My number 7 higher. So Marty's number 7 was Spycraft. We're going to show that on the list here. And then Marty's number 6 and I forgot what number it was. My number 8 are going to be the same. So Marty, I'll let you tell everybody what it is. Then we can talk about it.
Number 6.
Yes.
Okay, so remember I said I really enjoyed MMOs? Well, one of my favorite MMOs of all time was World of Warcraft. So when they came out with the World of Warcraft TCG, I was all in. I was all in from day one, man. I was like buying beta stuff, and I was like getting demo deck. We printed out demo decks so we could play at the game store and teach other people how to get into it. But check this out. I actually I had unopened booster packs, man. I had like 4 unopened booster packs here. I don't know. The thing is that you remember with these that you could get the cards where you could get like mounts
in the game
and bonus to have scratch off cards. Yeah. I found one the other day that I need to put on eBay because it's going for $100.
Oh yeah, you do.
Wow.
Yeah, you do.
Is it the turtle?
I don't remember. It was some sort of mount. I don't remember, but I know that you played this game, Joel. So I'm not going to talk everything about it. But what I loved about it is the fact that you played as a single character. Yeah. And you could add things to it. You could add armor and weapons and everything, and then get your minions out there to help you fight.
Yeah.
I never play Hearthstone because I was so ticked off at how streamlined, how much they stripped away from this game to make Hearthstone, that I didn't even feel like it was the same game.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I played a decent amount of Hearthstone and really enjoyed that, but yeah, the whole thing where you just like get mana every turn was kind of like, oh, okay. So it kind of makes it a little bit boring compared to some of the choices you used to have to make with World of Warcraft. But the thing that keeps this game higher on the list than it probably would otherwise be for me is the raid mode. How you could get the Onyxia and the Molten Core raid decks and play like a one versus many thing. And it was cool because you would build your decks a certain way to play head-to-head, mage versus rogue or whatever. But then when you went to play the the raid, you had to build your decks in kind of a different way if you were playing as the heroes. So it really was like 2 games in one. And we played a fair amount of, just a normal game. But once I think I got the Onyxia deck, yeah. Once I got that, we just had a blast. Like that evening just evaporated when we first got that, and we just played it again and again and again. And it was so much like the MMO where you had like the different stages to Oni and all this different stuff and lots of cool little strategies and everything like that. And that's one of my better gaming memories from a while ago was playing those raid decks. And I haven't really seen a trading card game or LCG even do that kind of thing where you have a one versus many and if I recall correctly, even the Onyxia player or the raid player could build their deck. Like there was some customization in there within that larger box. And that's a vague memory of that part of it. But that would be really neat if we could have something like that again.
Do you remember playing those decks and there was sealed loot cards?
That's right.
And if you got all the way through it? Yep.
That's so neat. So neat.
Yep. And so I don't know if you know this, but about a couple months ago, we interviewed Justin Gary, who designed Ascension.
That,
yeah, and so he did Ascension Tactics. He used to work at Upper Deck and made the World of Warcraft miniatures game. He came up for doing this raid sort of thing with the miniatures game, and they couldn't get it to work. So they took his idea and applied it to the card game. So those raid decks came from Justin Gary.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Super cool.
And Ascension Tactics is going to have like it has like a solo mode where you can play against the AI and stuff, where they have like souped up bosses and stuff. So that'll be cool if it maybe there'll be some kind of raid aspect in that game eventually. All right.
Yeah. And I see people in the chat talking about the raids. Like you said, Joel, I can't think of any other game since then it's had that sort of one versus many customizable element to it, like this game had.
Right.
It's so good.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was your number 6 and my number 8. So we're gonna go back to my number 6, but that's also higher on
Oh my!
Marty's lists. I'm like the watered down version of both of you, because all my stuff is on your lists. So all right, we're gonna skip me on number 6. We're gonna skip Matt's number 6 because his is higher on Marty's list. Okay, so now we're at number 5, which is what my number 7 was. So Matt, go ahead and do your number 5.
Okay, my number 5 is the Star Wars LCG.
Yes.
I think it was called Star Wars the Card Game LCG. Joel, it's funny you mentioned it. Maybe I'll cover this towards the end of this card game, but this actually had that mechanic you were talking about, but it was in one expansion that added it. But I'll get to that in a second. Okay. But my thought of the Star Wars LCG, obviously Star Wars, it's great. I really enjoyed 2 major things about it. I really like I'm gonna butcher the name of the actual mechanical parts of it, but like when you were in a fight with someone or you were battling, the bidding system, right? Playing a certain number of cards face down, committing cards or whatever. That was awesome. That felt really, really cool. And then you flip it over and you see how many, do you have enough symbols to trigger the abilities on your AT-AT or whatever.
I think that was called the Edge battle or something like that.
Yes. Yeah, that's what it was. I loved that mechanic, and I really loved. I think it's still my favorite deck construction. Compromise.
Yeah.
Between Keyforge and between like your Game of Thrones 60-card Nightmare Building deck at CCG, the pod system was amazing. 6-card pods, you get 5 of them. When you had to put, I forget how many. It was either 5 or 6, and you could put 8 to 12 in a deck, something like that, right? Or 10 to 12.
Yeah, you brought like a location with you. And that location dictated what you could bring. And I think there was some mandatory cards, but then you could stretch it a little bit. And so you brought, I think, if I recall correctly, you had to bring 3 and exactly 3, but I could be misremembering that. And so you brought that, and that was your deck. So that was like it was almost like your 3 vignettes in an episode of a movie or a TV show. These are the 3 locations that we're going to compete over. And so like I would go and attack your locations, you would attack my locations, and then those would bring along with them like all the thematic baggage of those other characters and everything.
Yeah, what was it? I'm looking right here real quick if you don't mind. Yeah. So there's you pick an affiliation card, Lights That Are Dark, or you could also be Scum and Villainy, right? Or you could also be the Scoundrels or a Smuggler, whatever.
Yeah.
And and then you have to pick at least 10 objectives, and then you create an objective deck. Each objective comes with 5 cards. So your deck's at least 10. I think it's 10 to 12 objectives, and then there was 5 cards in that that came along with that objective. Right. So that made up your 60 card or your 30 card or however many decks you had on the deck. But it was so cool. You had those choices to make about what you wanted to build it with, but it wasn't so overwhelming. You could build a deck in 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, I kind of let this one slide when it first came out because it got a lot of bad press because the gist of it was that I heard like, oh, you could have Chewbacca fighting a TIE fighter or something. But when I actually finally got around to playing it, it wasn't really quite like that. That description isn't really appropriate, I don't think. Yep. It was a little bit more abstract and obtuse in that way. But to me, all of those kind of thematic connections ended up making sense. It's like, okay, Chewbacca sabotages the TIE fighter or whatever, or he hops into the ion cannon and takes a shot at it. Like those kind of things just kind of naturally, sort of organically seem like they would evolve out of the game.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I remember the complaints. It was like Star Destroyer versus like Leia or something like that. I was like, this is crazy. I was like, well, she's using her intrigue and intellect to like overpower and, you can make the connection there. But right. I understood the initial confusion. At a glance, it looks like that, but it's more it was never called a battle, right? It was called like an edge thing. And they described that as like this tense movie-like moment where this important event is happening that leads to this final consequence.
Yeah. And then they had that thing with the Death Star where you would like tick it up, and the dark side guy could spend that and like push it even more, and it was almost like a game timer. So the way that game would end would be so different than just like reduce you to 0 or whatever, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. His timer runs out because the Death Star is powered up and it can blast you now.
Yep.
I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mark, did you ever play this one?
I got an anecdote.
Okay.
What year did this game come out?
12?
2012.
Okay, 2012. And 20. Really? It was that long ago?
I don't know. I might
so.
be remembering the announcement of the co-op version of this, and then they actually released
December.
It. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's right. It was initially going to be a co-op game. December 2012.
Well, there's my anecdote. So I went to Gen Con and demoed the game. And I played the game, and I was a huge Lord of the Rings LCG fan. And I told the demo, I said, this is Lord of the Rings with Star Wars. Mm-hmm. And he went, yeah, isn't it great? And I went, no. I said, it's Lord of the Rings with Star Wars. Well, obviously I wasn't the only one. Everybody came back and said, you already have this game. Yeah. And then they went back and retooled it and made it a PvP game.
Got it.
All righty.
Yeah, and real quick, Joe. There was one thing that they did add. The third expansion added one versus many. You could do one. The Empire player would have his own custom deck, and then it was 2v. You could either do 2 versus 1 or 3 versus 1, and they would get different. There was more hit points depending on the number of players you had. So it was, it was very limited, but it was cool that they added it. I was excited to see that, and then pretty much right after that, I kind of stopped collecting it.
Yeah, I never had a chance to do that one. This is one that I do kind of sort of regret letting go though, because. It probably should be higher on my list. I really had a great time with this one. All right, so now we're going to do... What are we at? My number 5 now? Let me think.
Yes. Yep.
It's bad enough when I got to juggle 10 of these. Now I got to juggle 30 of them, and some of them match. So my number 5 is actually a pretty old one. A little bit obscure. It is... whoops, wrong one. I just spoiled one for later. I clicked on there because it's the same name. Because I didn't name it right. It's Warhammer, not the other one I showed for a second. It's Warhammer Invasion. This is from Fantasy Flight Games.
Oh, yeah.
And I really like this game. It did something that was a lot. It has been mentioned a lot so far, and will continue to be mentioned further up this list. Because in this game, you have this giant card, this giant board. And you had, I forget what the different sections were called. There was like, in the front of the card, facing your opponent was like your territory. And so you would do like the actual combat and fighting there. But then you had like a quest side of the board on the right. And the left-hand side had like a resources or economy side. So you could play these cards in your deck. And the deck was all this Warhammer stuff. Like you had a dwarf deck and orc deck and elf deck and all this. And you'd play the card depending on which part of that board you put it on. Would either help you get resources, which is like mana to spend, or help you draw extra cards, or put it, in front to fight. And then from the fighting position, you could fight the different locations. And so you could go attack their resources, attack their card draw, or attack their other fighters. And it's this really cool balance, almost like a Euro game, of like balancing your economy. It felt very Euro-y and for this type of thing. And it had a cool, Warhammer theme and everything. And there's another one I wish, I could go out and just find, a complete collection of it. Just stick it in a box somewhere and break it out. Because some of these folks I talked about, playing Magic with and stuff earlier, we played a decent amount of this. Not that long ago. I actually came onto this one kind of late. It hadn't been canceled yet, but I think once we picked it up, probably within the next year and a half, maybe 2 years, it got, finished. So that was kind of a bummer, but... I don't know if you guys either of you played this one, but it was super fun, really smart.
I have not played it.
Yeah.
And I actually found my when I was looking for all these other cards, I found my boards the other day.
Oh, nice.
And an unopened expansion pack. I don't know what it is me and unopened packs, but anyway, yeah, Joel, it was really cool, and I don't remember why I didn't play more of it because Tony, my co-host, and I played it. We really enjoyed it. But I don't know, because it was very much a Euro game. And you're right. It was so cool. It's like, well, if I play the card here, it means this. If I play it here, it means this. If I play it here, it means this. So there's all these, man, to me, Fantasy Flight has a bunch of an amazing mechanics in games with licenses they no longer have.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, they do. Forbidden Stars,
StarCraft, Invasion. Yep. Y'all didn't care for Warhammer Conquest, did you?
I didn't. I only played it once, and I've heard a lot of people say they really enjoyed it after kind of getting into it more, but that first play wasn't really for me.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I didn't play it. I think I have the core set, but that's all I got.
All right, so that's my number 5. Now we're going to do, I think Marty's number 5. Yes, we will. And we mentioned it earlier.
Yes. So talking about LCG, so Fantasy Flight came out with early on. They had the Game of Thrones LCG. They had the Call of Cthulhu. They had what we just talked about, Warhammer Invasion.
Mm-hmm.
All 3 were PvP. And then all of a sudden, it's like, hey, here's an LCG game, Lord of the Rings, but this one is co-op. I was like, well, what's that?
Yeah.
A co-op customizable game?
Yeah.
I was like, huh? And I love Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is one of my favorite universes. So me and Tony said, we're in. We are all in. And I dove in heavy to that game. I loved being able to build my deck with 3 different characters and have 3 different spheres different spheres of power. And each one of them generate a certain type of sphere, resource. And you have to spend that particular resource to activate certain cards. And you have the idea that you're going questing, and then you're attacking, and you're kind of playing through a scenario or a story. You try to travel to a location, try to complete quests. They try to make it very thematic. They came out the deluxe expansions where you play through the 3 books, Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, and Return of the King. I still have those unopened.
Of course you do.
The reason why is because I have several Lord of the Rings friends around here.
Yeah.
And our goal is to, like, one weekend, get together and play through the entire 3 books and open up those packs. But anyway, Lord of the Rings LCG was when I really bought into the LCG format, and I've been a fan ever since.
Yeah, I've played this as well and really enjoyed it. Just played through the base game, didn't pick up any expansion or anything, but it's really you can kind of see the tendrils of this in some other kind of co-op-y card games that come after it. That formula that they've got there, you can kind of see that in a lot of the other games after this. And it's really fun.
Yeah, I played this one a little bit too. I really enjoyed the whole theme and everything. The only thing that, again, my deck building is what kind of slowed me down on it. I remember I was switching between like solo and 2-player, and then getting around with 4 players, and I was the only one with a card collection. So every time it was like, all right, stop everything we're doing, rebuild 4 decks. And like after we did that 2 or 3 times, it turned our sessions into like 3-hour sessions. But again, I mean that's my personal preference. But I think the game it's amazing. Like I loved everything about it. I just wish I could build decks a little bit quicker. Like I didn't have the mind to do it just yet. But I do. It's one of my regrets. I do wish I stuck with it a bit longer.
And it came out in 2011, and the current cycle will be the last cycle, and it will be over. So a 9-year run, I think, is pretty impressive.
Oh, yeah.
That is really good. Yeah.
Very good. Okay, so now we've gone through our top 5 now. So let's do a quick recap over here on the list. So Marty's number 5 was Lord of the Rings. There we go. And then we'll pop over and... You guys can't see this, but the folks watching can see it. Let's see here. So... let's see, but number 6. Did I do my number 6, or was it higher? My number 6 was higher. My number.
I think you said yours was higher.
Yeah, it was. Oops. Right. All right. So everybody's watching can see the list with some gaps in Joel and Matt's list there. Those are our 10 through 5, and some of these other ones are higher on somebody else's list. So Marty and I both have their number 4 as the exact same game. And I gave a big clue to it when we announced the beginning of this, the reason that kicked this show off. So Marty, I'll let you announce it.
Oh, it's Ashes, Rise of the Phoenixborn from Plaid Hat Games, came out in 2015, designed by Isaac Vega with art by Fernando Suarez.
Yeah, I love Ashes. I'm really excited for the 1.5 revision, and the thing I like about Ashes is it has this really back and forth, very tactical gameplay. So if you look at like a game like Magic, for example, it's kind of like an old school like Warhammer or 40K game. It's like I put my land out, I summon my creatures, I send my attackers in, I do my recovery step, da 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 da, and then you go and you do all your steps. But Ashes has this real cool back and forth. I do an action, you do an action. I do an action, you do an action. And that quick, snappy gameplay and the kind of the shift in tactics compared to a lot of these other games where you do that, you have to set up your whole turn. I really like that. It feels a lot more visceral in terms of the combat side of it. Like you're just right in there, you throw a blow, I block, you throw a blow, I block. That was just really cool. And then, of course, the mana system in this is just really... It's all dice-driven. It's almost... I would say, is it 50% dice game, 50% card game? I mean, it's close. It's probably like 60% card game. But just the way that you can interchange those dice and upgrade them and, have the different types of mana that they generate. It's just something really neat. And the way you can kind of like save dice and, carry them forward to the next turn and try to build up for a better roll and stuff. And all the cool abilities and everything are really neat.
Yeah. So for me, I remember at Origins, I guess, was it 2015? When I sat with Isaac Vega and he said, "Hey, I want to show you this game," and he told me about the dice. And I'm like, dude, that is really cool. The fact that you have basically 10 resources, and depending on how they come out, that's what you're going to have to spend. I thought, man, that's neat. But the thing that got me, that blew me away, that nobody's ever done, is you got your starting 5. I went, wait, what? He said, yeah.
Oh,
you
right.
Pick your
Forgot that, yeah.
You pick your starting 5 cards. Yeah. I went, Isaac, I said,
that's so cool.
That is mind-blowing. Yeah. Instead of having to draw through your deck to get what you want, he says, yeah, that's the whole goal. Why start a game out slow? Put the 5 cards you need right up front and get them into play. Right. I gave him a standing ovation and a hug right there.
I bet you did. No, I totally forgot about that. I mean, that is such a cool... It's really like... It's such... I want to call it like a brave mechanic. Because it's really brave to do that.
Yes.
Because these games are so much predicated on like mitigating that card draw. And Isaac and the team were like, just like, you know what, screw it. Here, just take the cards. And we'll rebalance the game around that. And yeah, that's really a cool... innovative list. The only real question is, why is this not on Matt's list?
Yeah, no, that was I figure I had to defend myself in my it should be on there. It came out at a time it didn't land with my group at the time. I don't know, for whatever reason I usually have at least one partner that I can find to CCG game or LCG with me. For some reason, I don't know why it didn't land, and I don't think it was the quality of the game. It might have just been a weird first match or something. But yes, I always regretted it. I remember, Marty, I think I jumped in a Skype with you and Rodney playing it just because I wanted to watch people play and like be a part of this game because I liked it so much. But it would be on there if I had played it more. I wanted to at least include stuff that I had put, a good amount of time into, played, more than some games, that kind of thing.
Oh, another thing. As far as I know, this was the first game I've ever played that had a 30-card deck. Many have copied it since then.
Yes.
But I think that was the first one and I thought, that's amazing. Deck building's easier. 3 copies per card, 30-card deck. You're off on it.
And the other thing I liked about that is they gave you, like, whenever you summon monsters or creatures, sometimes they were like tokens. And so they gave you like a little stack of them. And so you never had to worry about... It was such I don't know why, it's so simple and such a breath of fresh air. Instead of like having to draw that creature card, you had to just get that spell out, and then you could activate that and cast that once you had it out. And then you just grab from your stack of creatures and put them out. And that just made it just feel so fresh and different than, well, I didn't draw any creatures, and I can't put them out because I didn't draw them. But, it's such a simple shift. Okay, so well, that's...
but I will say that there was a lot of problems that came as that game went along. There was a lot of very confusing timing issues.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And what's cool is that's what they're trying to fix. Planet Games now has the original tester as the designer, and he's tweaking all that stuff to try to get rid of this very confusing timing mechanic. It's like, oh, wait a minute, I want to interrupt you. Oh, wait a minute, I want to interrupt that. Well, that's going to cause this, and these crazy timing things. Yeah. Hopefully that's all taken care of and making it easier game to play.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. I got good faith that they will.
Yeah.
So moving along to that was both Marty and I's number 4, and Matt's number 4 is actually higher on my list. So
All right.
so we're gonna skip. Your number 4. Go right to your number 3 there, Matt.
All right. I feel weird about having this where it is. I told you that before, but my number 3 is Marvel Dice Masters. At least the first 2 sets, the Avengers versus X-Men and the whatever the next one was. It was like X-Men. I forget the name of the second one.
Yeah.
And again, like I had like a caveat at the beginning, like my interest in. I think a good chunk of the CCG interest, the thing that draws me into it, is the collectible aspect, and having the theme be Marvel and like collecting these cards with like the little. It's still silly, but even that little colored bar that told you the rarity, you're like, oh, I opened a rare. Oh, it's like that. That's like exciting. You know what I mean? And then like on top of the fact that it's just this cool thing where you can put a certain amount of dice for each of these characters into your pool. It was pretty quick to build. I went all out. I got like custom play mats that I got from like the inked playmat site, and people would put up their own designs for these cool like X-Men themed playmats. Right. And I just really enjoyed. I played a ton of it. It just happened to land in my group, right? It was the first CCG I had ever gotten into since Magic the Gathering, right? True CCG, like collectible. Right. And it landed just right with my group. I think there was at least 3 or 4 of us that had bought multiple booster boxes to play along, and that just hasn't happened in a long time. Usually I kind of buy everything and kind of facilitate the collection. Even the games that I have higher on my list here, I've always been the facilitator of it, and then we kind of share my pool of cards. Right. But this one hit just right, that it was unique enough, like, hey, now I'm opening a booster pack. There's a die in here. That's so cool, like, so that made everyone kind of get into it, and we played the heck out of it. And we even got to the point where we had made our own house rules. Like Black Widow was totally broken in the first set. I don't know if you guys ever played that game.
I have, and I vaguely remember
broken,
that. Yeah,
Green Goblin broken.
Yeah.
Like there was like 2 super rares that were just stupid broken. But you just like you don't play without them. Like all the tournaments were dominated by those 2 cards, and like that was lame. So we kind of house ruled that stuff, so we could even enjoy that stuff even more. But yeah, played the heck out of that one. I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I enjoyed this one too. I was not at all a fan of Couriers, which is what this was sort of based on.
Yeah, I sold all that very quickly after I.
Yeah, and I was very like trepidatious going into this, and everybody was like, "No, you got to try it." I hated Couriers too, but I like this, and I'm like, "Well, okay, I'll take your word for it." And so, so when we got a chance to play this, and my group doesn't usually get into this style of game that much, and even some of them did, so that was pretty telling. We had a great time with it there for a few months for sure.
We revisited a couple months ago. WizKids had a new starter box, and we checked it out. And I forgot how you have to kind of learn. It's like, well, when you're attacked, your dice goes here, but if you didn't block, they go here. There's different ways the dice move on the mat. But I kind of had to refamiliarize myself with. But once I got into it, I was like, yeah, this was a good game. Yeah. However, there's something that really hurt that game early on that also hurt another game that's on this list, and we'll talk about it when we get to that game.
Yep, I totally agree with that.
I think there's something that has in common with this game. Not necessarily the problem, but also another piece of the game. So anyway, I don't want to spoil anything. So that's number. What was that? Number 3 for you.
That's my number 3.
Right.
Yep.
So I'm gonna go to my number 3. And this is a similar theme, but a different complete style game. And this is the Versus System 2-player card game from Upper Deck. Now, I played the original Versus, which was a trading card game with packs, way back in 2004, I think it came, and got really into that. I played that, I want to say professionally, because I didn't win a lot of tournaments, but I did win some tournaments and stuff, and actually won some money, and played in the first or second Pro Tour event down in Los Angeles. And I got trounced there. And then entered a draft and got trounced. And then entered the 10K and got trounced. But then I did place in a 10K over in Seattle. So anyway, needless to say, I was super into it and actually wrote a piece of software that you could actually build and draft the game with, and worked with another piece of software to actually play games online, because I was on a team. And we used that, and I wasn't the guy that built the deck. Another guy built this deck that like took over the meta for like a year. and I was super into it. But then, so fast forward, that game slowly died off. It got some of the problems similar to Ashes, where it got kind of too big for its britches, and it got kind of out of control with all the different powers and sets and everything. And then, so Upper Deck and then re-released the LCG version of that, which had some streamlined mechanics and worked a little bit differently. It's definitely a different game, but it has a lot in common. So it's probably 75% the same game. And a couple things that it had that is really neat is, Marty, one of the early ones you mentioned, I think it was your number 10, was you had that kind of formations of where you put your cards. So this just has a front row and a back row. So if you're in the back row, you can't attack your opponent unless that character has ranged. And you can't attack beyond your opponent's front row unless you have flying to fly over their front row. So you had this kind of thing where you might hide people in the back that have cool abilities, so you don't want them getting touched, and the other guys in front that were bigger and tougher to block them, and all this kind of stuff. So that was really neat. It was like playing like almost a little miniature game without any real space, but you still had that spatial thought. And the second thing it did, which just really, I wish other games would do this, and I think the World of Warcraft TCG basically did the same thing, because a lot of the designers were in common, is instead of drawing one card on your turn, you drew 2 cards. Every turn, you drew 2 cards. And you could use any cards you want as a resource, as mana. Now, they had special cards that were locations. You put them... Well, in the old game, you put them face down, but in the new one, you put them face up. And they had cool symbols, and they would trigger abilities. But if you had a card, you're like, I'm not going to use this card. You can just put it face down, and it's a resource. But there's a real decision to be made there. Instead of like Hearthstone, where they just give you mana every turn, then you can say, well, I've got this character that costs 8. I'm not going to use this guy for a while. I know there's 2 or 3 others in my deck. So first turn, I'm just going to drop it down, and there's my mana for the turn. But, you're taking a risk there that you might not draw the other one later. Just real cool tactical combat. Lots of interesting abilities. The original, you could have DC and Marvel together. I mean, some of the best decks were like a Batman and Brave and Bold, with like the Teen Titans deck versus a Spider-Man deck. So you could set up those kind of cool scenarios and stuff. Now, the new one's all Marvel stuff, but you can still have fun. There's like a cool Thanos deck that was totally broken, and they just reprinted Thanos in like the second expansion. It was like, you have to use this one now. That's not broken. But yeah, this probably, looking at my list here, these top kind of 3, Ashes is kind of creeping in there, but those top 3, this could all kind of replace each other as my number 1, because this one I've really just have... And this one's still going, the LCG. It's still going. I don't think it's a very big community or anything, but they're still pumping out expansions for it.
I played I was looking when it came out. It came out in 2004 from Upper Deck, and I for sure, anything that was a CCG with like an IP I liked, I was into it. So I did play that early game too, and really enjoyed it. I played for a while until actually Upper Deck released the Wild TCG, and then that kind of replaced it.
Yeah, that I think that and the game itself kind of killed off the original Versus, was the WoW one coming along. So that was my number 3.
Sounds cool.
And so now we're going to go to Marty's number 3, which was my number 6. So take it away, Marty.
Okay. Sure. So I was so into the Lord of the Rings LCG in 2011. It's like, I'd like to play like a competitive game. Mm-hmm. And so the next year, Fantasy Flight released Android Netrunner. And I was totally smitten with that game. The theme was unique. Cyberpunk theme, hacking. I thought that was really cool, unique. But the thing that got me is you had 2 totally asymmetric ways to play. You had the runner, which had their own deck, their own different cards, their own actions. And you had the corporation that had its own actions, deck, etc. The win conditions for each were different. And I love building a corporation deck, a runner deck, then sitting down, playing, swapping, playing again. It's one of those games that I rarely get into like the meta and really learn how cards work and everything, but I was hard and heavy. I knew every card. I never had to, I knew the names, like, yeah, I know what that does, sort of thing. And I was so into it that by the time the card pool got so large and I got so old that I couldn't remember and keep up anymore, is when I kind of started falling away. But then I heard a lot of other Netrunner players saying too, it's just gotten insane. It's like I think there was a lot of cards they had to, nerf or just get rid of or limit that you could have in the deck. It just got kind of unwieldy from what I understand.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love this game. Probably for the first cycle of expansions, I kind of stopped after that first cycle because it just kind of gets out of hand. It's like you always start off thinking, "Oh, I'll keep up with this," and I had a buddy at work that we played with. Played it with me, and like you said, yeah, everything you said. The two asymmetrical sides. That's something you don't really see. I liked the whole theme of it, where you kind of build up the ice or the firewall of stuff, and then you're trying to hack, through it. And I like the whole deduction part of it, where there's the extra level of bluffing, and that's something that like even Magic and stuff has, because at Magic, like you'll play a card, you're like, hey, counterspell that. Hey, no, I want you to counterspell, because then your big one's coming after it. You know what I mean? So that little layer there, that like little mind, that Yomi aspect of it, right? That is just all over Netrunner, and I really love that. Yeah.
Well, wasn't that so cool? It's like, you're playing the corporation, they start running, and you set a trap.
Yeah.
And it's like, and you could tell they're struggling. Should I jack out? Should I continue? So they're going, please continue. Please continue.
Yeah.
Please continue. Because you want to flip over that track card.
Yeah.
The terminology was crazy. Boy, there was a learning curve for learning everything, because everything had its own name. It wasn't, a hand. It was grip.
Yeah.
And, it was stack. And, God, I can't remember what all this stuff was. But anyway, everything had its own unique name you had to come up with.
Yeah. No, yeah. It was great. It was great. And I feel like I'm going to get a little bit of flack for not having it higher on my list, but yeah. But actually, so there's a game that I have that replaces it, and I'll try to defend that. But yeah, definitely Netrunner is fantastic. Fantastic game.
Yeah.
Did you play
I wish
that?
I had folks. I did. I played a little bit. I think I played against like one opponent a couple of times. I loved it. But it might have been my wife playing against me, and she was really into the Star Wars LCG as opposed to that. I think it was. When did this come out? Did it come out before or after? I don't know. I played it a little bit.
This came out before Star Wars, yeah.
Before, yeah. I think we played that first, and it was a little too. It was like you said, Marty. It was complex and heavy, and the teach was really intense. And I don't think I could get it to stick. But I always wanted to play it. I was always watching like the Shut Up and Sit Down guys did tons of stuff about like their adventures in running Netrunner decks, and I talked about tournaments and all that stuff. And I always thought that was an interesting listen.
Yep,
good stuff.
So that's the number 3. So Marty, we're going to stick with you on the number 2, which was Matt's number 6.
Okay. So I played Lord of the Rings LCG, loved the co-op format. And then once again at Gen Con, there was like, wait a minute, Arkham Horror LCG? Well, that sounds kind of cool. So I went and did a demo of that. And as soon as I sat down, they said, now, what's really different about this game is you have locations. And I went, locations? And they put out these cards and generated a map. And it's like, yeah, so you have a little player card, and you're going to be able to move around this map and do different things. I went, oh, my gosh, how complicated are the phases? Because I remember how the LCG was for Lord of the Rings. I was like, no. There's no phases. You just got 2 actions. Take on your turn. What you want to do? You want to draw a card? You want to get a resource? You want to move? You want to fight? You went, oh. I said, just don't give me 2 actions. Do my turn with anything I want. I went, yeah, that's cool. They said, oh, wait a minute. There's a little story behind this. I went, excuse me? And so they read off the narrative and everything, and all of a sudden I was just engrossed. Ever since that came out, 2016, I've been playing this game. I just played last week. I have a steady group that we're playing through all the expansions. This is a game that, if I was to rank my top favorite games of all time, even though this is number 2 on this particular list, it's one of my top games now of all time, because for me, there's no better merging of a strategic game and a narrative game that merges so well together. I feel like I have some control over things, but then there's the chaos of pulling that token, knowing there might be the auto fail. I get into the story. I love reading the flavor text, and it's like things like last week, we're early in the campaign, and because of a bad pull I had that I failed, that triggered a different ending for us in the story. And that's going to haunt me because I know what should have happened that we had to write in the campaign log. And now, from now on, it's going to keep referencing. Remember that thing that happened that you didn't get or whatever? Yeah, well, now that sucks for you now, sort of deal. So, yeah, that is why it's my number 2 and actually one of my favorite games of all time.
Nice. Yeah, that was that would probably be up higher on the list too. If I've gone through the first 2 sets and I really really love them. I don't, for some reason, I don't know. It was sort of like midway up my list. I think it was number 6. It's deep. It's got lots of fun mechanics. The deck building is straightforward, like you said. Like it's a 30 card deck, right? That doesn't take too much to build. Yeah, the theme, reading the story, kind of going along with it. That's just awesome. And I really love that you can just lose and keep going on through. Mm-hmm. It's like you could just lose all 6 scenarios in a campaign, and you still get to the conclusion. It's not just do it again over and over again until you beat it. I kind of like that. Obviously, I'm going to play the campaign again when I lose, but I think that that's cool.
Right, and I forgot, it totally adds the RPG element. So with Lord of the Rings, basically, you had to finish before you could continue, and you were constantly tweaking your deck in order to get to that one scenario. Like you said, you can lose, but you'll continue. But you're playing with the same deck. You get XP, you upgrade your deck. So then it adds this role-playing element where you're starting with this character and you're going to play hours with this one character and make them better and tweak them. Or maybe there's a weakness that's injected to their deck that makes them a little more fearful of certain things. Oh, mwah. And the design space is so wide open to do so many things. Every time we play a scenario that's a little different, where we're not just fighting monsters, I'm just like, this is brilliant. Again, I stand up and give myself a high five, how well it's played.
That's awesome, man. I got to get through more. I've only done, I think, the second, whatever the second one, I forget the name. The Dunwich Horror one, the six scenarios that go along with that, or the 8, sorry. So good. Can't wait to do more.
Awesome. And now there's a reason it's not on my list, and that will be covered shortly. So just before anybody gets upset. But I just wanted to tell you, you guys have gushed or waxed and waned about it, but it's an excellent game. It's theoretically a better game than the one that I have that replaced it, but not for me. So that's okay. So that was your number 2, right? Number 3. Number 2.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2. Okay. So we're going to go to my number 2, which is, and Matt's, this was also on Matt's list. Matt's number 8. So this is the one I sneak peeked earlier on accident. And that's Warhammer Age of Sigmar Champions. And I would say, so I have to caveat this because I know in the past I've listed Age of Sigmar, the miniature game, as my number 1 game of all time. That maybe has a little bit to do with why this is so high on my list, but I don't actually think so unless it's some kind of like deep-seated bias that I can't recognize. I want to recognize it, but I don't think it's just that. Because I think this game actually is kind of what didn't really replace Netrunner, but to me kind of does replace Netrunner. So you have lanes in this one. And I've tried other lane games, like Soulforge is the one that's only online. It's actually pretty fun, but it's now defunct. And there's been a couple other games where you have like lanes of combat. And you put your champions in the lanes, and they have these different like icons on them. And so when you play cards to those lanes, they have to match like the type, like warrior and mage. But you're also trying to match these icons to rotate that champion. And once you rotate it around, it might trigger abilities as they rotate. But there'll be a random blessing. You get to pick the blessings to put in your deck, but you don't know actually where they're at. And so once they rotate all the way around, that'll trigger a blessing, which is usually like an amazing, like game-breaking thing. But everybody has them in their deck. And then otherwise you're just trying to smash, each other player, kind of like in Magic or Versus or something. But man, so I played, we were just talking before we got on here, I probably played, I think, 7, maybe 8 games of this in person, in real life, and over 100 on the app, because what you could do is you could scan the cards, and then it puts them into your game online, so you don't have to, I never spent a cent on the thing online, because you get the card, and it goes in the app, and then it's there. And so then I played hundreds of games on the app, and really you get this cool ladder system. I went way up the ladder, and once you kind of play the games in the meta, it does this really interesting thing, which kind of made it feel like Netrunner. We're like, oh, he's playing the big Orc Gordrak deck, which I know does these couple of things really well. But then after you sort of get through the net listing, you find the people that are really experimenting with it and doing those weird things to sort of counter like the really powerful Flesh Eater Quartz deck or the crazy Stormcast deck or all these other decks. And it became this, again, that kind of guessing game, that deduction element really seeped into it once you got kind of past some of that stuff, because you knew based on the heroes and then you know what kind of blessings they're going for. It was this really interesting dichotomy between, I'm going to play this card to do damage or get this effect, but you can't neglect those blessings. You have to try to match the types and the icon types, because you know once that blessing triggers, like, it's just going to be mayhem and it's going to be great. And you want to try to prevent your opponent from hitting you in the head, but also preventing their blessing activation. It becomes this real kind of tense, kind of sweaty thing where it's like, oh no, I know it's going to be that one blessing because you've seen it before. It's just fantastic. Absolutely loved it. But it's totally dead. You can still play it online. They don't manufacture any more cards, so I feel honestly bad for not mentioning it this high in the list, but I've had that much fun with it. You can still get on and play it for free on Steam or on iOS, and then if you want to spend money, I would not throw a penny at this game because it's going to be gone. But it's really fun. And they have, like, online, they have, like, quests, and you can go on, like, campaigns, and it's like this, and they set up these crazy, like, puzzles with this whole lane thing. So if you want to fight like a boss, talking about like the raid battles, they will set up these ridiculous things where the computer is cheating. And like, this isn't even legal in the game, but it's this little puzzle. Like, you get a deck and the computer gets this deck and you have to figure out how to make your deck beat that deck. And there's a big, like, long campaign, so you go and play like 30 games of it. And you unlock new cards for your decks and stuff. But Matt, you want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, no, you're making me wish I put this higher on my list here and you talk about it, man. I really enjoyed this game for quite a while. I think the last time I was at Gen Con now was it 2018? And every one of my friends picked it up and we all bought, like, I think we split like 3 or 4 booster boxes. Like, we just went all out. Yeah. And we played that game in person. We went to the demo that they were giving out. We got our starter decks, and then we went and got a bunch of booster packs. We bought all the play mats, like the Gen Con play mats, and we just hung out at the top of the Omni in the mezzanine there and played until like 4 or 5 in the morning, like 2 or 3 nights in a row. We kept playing it. We kept tweaking our decks, and it's one of my fondest CCG card game memories. Mm-hmm. I think was just playing that whole weekend of playing it. I mean, that was obviously the most I ever physically played it in person.
Right.
It was just so fun discovering the game and all those things that you just described, like the tense, waiting for your opponent, like what's his blessing going to be. And I got to say, one of the things that there wasn't anything quite as satisfying to me than like having this like totally kick-ass powerful card and then like playing something that rolls it back 2 ticks and now it's going to trigger again 2 more times. Yeah. Like your opponent just goes like, no, and you're like, oh, here it comes, like another 7 damage 2 times in a row. That's some really good stuff. And I think probably we played it for a few months after Gen Con, and then I think we kind of all took it online.
Right.
And I played a lot on there too, like squeezing it into a lunch break or whatever here and there at work. It was great.
Oh yeah, I lived for lunch breaks during this period. Marty, you got any thoughts on this one? Or?
No, I thought it was an amazing game. I mean, I was there when it came out too. I remember we went and got the demo over there from, who made it?
Play
Fusion.
Yeah.
Play Fusion, yeah.
Yeah, Play Fusion. And I remember we really enjoyed it. But to me, that's the thing I thought was so cool. Oh, I can scan the cards and play online. Yep. But then I got worried. And I don't know where this is what hurt it, but
I think it did.
I think it was too much focus was on the digital version.
Yep.
Because it was big at my store, my local store. People were buying boxes of this stuff and playing. Yep. But then people just started kind of migrating towards the app and not coming into the store and playing. And then they probably realized, wait a minute, we don't have to print cardboard. Let's just release the cards on the app, and then that was it.
Yeah, same thing happened here. Exact same thing. Yeah.
I think one of the mistakes they made too, if I mean I don't know, but it seems like they made it too easy to get cards in the online game. Like the free to play game, in my opinion, should have been more restrictive. Because like I thought it was a way better deal to buy a physical booster card pack than to buy a pack of booster cards in the game, right? It was like the same style as Hearthstone where you pay like $2 and get 5 cards. Like that was a ripoff. You could go get a 14 card booster pack of Warhammer Champions in your local game store and scan every single card, and you're guaranteed at least 1 rare per pack and everything like that. But it was so easy. I think you and I even talked about it a bunch. It was like, you don't need to buy any cards for this game. You get they throw cards at you all the time. You get tons of. And especially if you got, you could go online and share your little scan booster card thing with like all the Facebook groups and everything else.
Yeah, because you could get the
get you-
in the starter sets you had like a special card that was just for that, for sharing, and there was like a Facebook, and I spent like like a day going through that
just
Facebook.
put your phone up to the screen and
that would give you
scrolling
like
while
the
you're
credits or whatever, and then I'm like, oh cool, I have like $1,000 worth of free coins or whatever. Know?
They were too generous because the game was awesome, and even going to it, like I thought that was a good model. Hey, I'll just go to the store and pick up 5 booster packs at my local game store, give them some business, come online and play it. But yeah, to your point, it was way too easy to get cards, I think, in the app.
Yeah. Okay, well, Heartbreak, maybe, I think you probably have it in the right spot on your list because it doesn't exist, so it shouldn't be at number 2. But neither does some of Marty's games. I don't even know if they actually ever did exist. I don't think Spycraft ever existed.
Wow, harsh.
Yeah. So, all right, we're going to do Matt's number 2, and then we'll do a little recap here before we get to number 1. So, Matt, go ahead and do your number 2.
All right, my number 2 might be controversial, but I think I say it is Summoner Wars from Plaid Hat Games. It is technically a deck builder. The decks can be built. It is the game comes with pre-constructed decks. There is a number of different releases for the game, and this is why I kind of put it in the CCG category. It's more of a miniatures game, honestly, because your cards basically move around a board. You're playing against an opponent by physically moving your cards around the board. Your combat involves rolling dice, but you are playing with a deck of cards that has a bunch of little interesting mechanisms. While you're moving around, you've got your ranged attackers that can shoot up to 3 spaces. You can, and I mean, just insane levels of asymmetry, right? Like the game had 16 unique factions spread across a bunch of different box sets. Then they had booster packs that came out to expand each faction where you could do additional deck building mechanisms and swap out your champions with other champions. And then there's a faction that was entirely called the Mercenaries faction that was just for bringing in this one neutral faction that could be mixed into any faction. And there's so much. I can't really speak to all of it being perfectly balanced. I played it casually for many years, and never really ran into huge balance problems. But just a really, really interesting game. Like even the setup for each faction on their card said like this is where all your starting units go, and that was asymmetric too. Some characters had specific like the vine walls instead of like the regular walls that would be there as terrain and stuff, and it was just this super cool game, an insane amount of content to play through. The deck building, again, my preference with deck building, it was kind of on the lighter side. You were really only swapping out champions and maybe your, I forget what they call it, the leader or whatever, so it was pretty light in that respect. And just fired on all cylinders for me. Even the dice combat was not too luck based. I think like a hit was 3, 4, 5, and 6, right? So like most of the time you're going to hit. It wasn't just a coin flip to land an attack. It was greater than that. And I just it just really hit everything for me. I played it a ton with my wife. I love the 4-player multiplayer that you could do, where your boards would kind of overlap and you could have units walk off the board and come in on the other side. Really great game, and they're, I guess, apparently making a second edition. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. But I'm not sure if I want to recollect everything because I literally have everything they made for the other one, and I kind of want to just hold it tight. Did I lose you guys? My mic's still
Oh
going?
no, I was muted. Sorry. I was sitting there agreeing with you and stuff, and I just asked you a question. Sorry, and then I realized I hit.
All right, what was it?
Are we on a Zoom call? What is this? So no, I meant to ask you, is it confirmed that they're doing a second edition, or is that just a rumor? Because I thought it was a rumor, like they were thinking about it.
Well, they said when Plaid Hat went independent again.
Yeah,
that was one of the first things they mentioned was redoing Summoner Wars, and if that did well, they would do Ashes.
Oh.
So that's why I was surprised that Ashes got the relaunch before Summoner War. But to be fair, I think that Team Covenant kind of came in and helped make that happen too.
Okay.
But one of the first things Colby said was we were redoing Summoner Wars and bringing it back.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. Man. It was incredible amount of content, and just the design space was just great. It just kept going and expanding. I loved it.
Yeah, I got to fairly try this one again, because I tried this one I don't know. It was around 2011, 10, 11 in there, and really did not care for it. So, but I was also kind of a dummy back then. All right, so let's do this. We'll do a recap here. So I'm showing the list again. You guys can't see it, but the rest of them can. So Matt's number 8 has come in. So I'm going to show that one. And then my number 10 isn't on there yet. I wonder why. Could be somebody's number 1. Let's see. The number 6s here. Netrunner and World of Warcraft and Arkham. Yep. So the 6s are all spoken for. Show that one. And then Matt's number 4 was higher on my list, so that might be my number 1. And let's see, and then the 2s and the 3s for all of us are we've spoken about. So I'm going to just show that list. So, but while I'm doing this, I thought we would just take a quick break before we get to our number 1 and throw out just real quick a couple of honorable mentions. I'll start and then we'll go to Marty and Matt. I got 2 honorable mentions, and Matt, Summoner Wars is kind of in the same ballpark. Basically, Mage Wars is a game that I really liked.
Yeah.
I played that before I got into miniature games, because Mage Wars is really a miniatures game where the cards are figures you move around on a big board with spaces, and you can build your spell book, and you have actually like an actual book, and they fit in the sleeves in the book, and you cast your spells, and once you cast it, it's done. Really cool game. Can play long. A game can take 2 to 3 hours, so I think that's a little bit longer than most people want. So definitely want to give a shout out to Mage Wars. The other one is, Warhammer Underworlds, which I think really is a collectible, constructible type of card game, more like an LCG. But it's heavily focused, obviously, on the miniature movement and combat. But you don't really build your army or your warband. You get a fixed warband, and then you build your 2 decks. You have an objective deck and then your action card deck. And honestly, that one in particular would be on this list. But I didn't feel right including it. I'm not as irresponsible as Matt is with his selections. No, I'm just playing around. No, but I really didn't feel like I should include it, because it is more of a miniatures game. I don't know. I have a hard time. It's kind of in that weird hybrid space. But I wanted to kind of keep this list sort of in the same realm as what we were all discussing. So anyway, those are my 2 honorable mentions. Marty, do you have any?
Yeah, and so I know there's some people talking right now in the discussion about the CCG, and we talked about this early on.
We did.
CCG typically has the connotation of a collectible card game where you're buying blind booster packs, and we kind of said at the beginning it's customizable card games where you're coming in with a pre-built deck. You're buying expansions, you're buying cards, pre-building a deck, and coming sit down and playing a game. I think, Matt, that's probably why you threw Summoner Wars on here. Yeah. Joel, I also would give a nod to Warhammer Underworlds. Because you can use the same army every time, but a different deck, and it's a different game. And you don't get to change up your army if you're playing with a particular army. Those models will not change. So in the interest of this list, I did not include it either, but I would give it a nod for sure. There's another one I would definitely give an honorable mention, but I don't want to say it because it's this guy's list, so I'm going to hold off on that. I did play a couple others people have mentioned. Doomtown Reloaded, I played. I enjoyed for a bit. It was a little bit overly complicated for what I was looking for. Having to the deck building requirement of that 52 cards and the limits were too tough for me. And then Legend of the Five Rings. I enjoyed that, but I couldn't get anybody else to really get into it here, so I kind of stopped playing it. I enjoy that game for what it is, but I just really never had a chance to really get into it.
All right. Those are good ones. Matt? I just want to say I also like Doomtown a lot, too. Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I never got to try that one. I would say some honorable mention ones that I played. I mean, it's not that they really were super standout for me, but I played a bit of the Transformers trading card game that just went defunct here in the last couple of weeks. With all the COVID stuff, it became harder for them to distribute it, and obviously they couldn't do tournaments, so it just died out. But I like Transformers. That was always a fun theme for me, growing up with the TV show and all that stuff, and the toys and that kind of thing. There was some. I think the first set was a little bland. Joel, I remember you and I played the starter set where we like split the deck in two.
What a pile of
so
junk.
Bad.
No, I'm just teasing. I'm teasing.
It was so bad. No, it was really bad. Like the initial starter box set that they were selling at Gen Con, whatever it was in 2018, and they were like, "Oh, just split this deck in half, and you have a 2-player starter set." Like it was garbage. The full set was pretty cool. Again, like a lot of the complexity in the first wave came in. Like the rares really are the ones that had really the more interesting mechanical elements, like, standing up your characters that are down and swapping this piece of gear to have these 3 things trigger, and that kind of combo stuff came from the rares. But by the time the second and really the third set rolled out, it started to get really cool, and there was a lot of deck building options, and and it was Wizards, right? So there was a good design space there. There was a lot of good people behind it, and I remember they put out at one point they put out a blog post describing why they were banning a particular card, and it was like 4 pages of explanation, and I was eating it up. I was like, this is awesome. Like, this is what Wizards does for card games, and they're so careful about it, and they think through these decisions. But in the end, I think Transformers just wasn't. It didn't make my list because I guess just didn't play it enough. Probably played it a couple dozen times with my buddies and stuff around here. A couple of times at my local game store, and then I just couldn't find an opponent to play it with, so I stopped playing it. But that was a good game. I enjoyed it.
Alrighty.
Man, people on the chat are coming up with some good stuff. I played UFS. Universal Fighting System was amazing. I think
was another one.
They're now doing Street Fighter versions of that, which is fun. It really does mimic a good game. Now, somebody else mentioned this, and I was going to say this earlier, but I thought, nah, it's not a card game. Dream Blade. Did y'all ever play the miniatures game Dream Blade from Wizards? No. It's also an Arkham Horror type game, but it's like an abstract version of chess where you're using minis. It was an amazing game, and it was one of those you had to buy booster boxes because you never knew what you were going to get. The only bad thing about it was the stats were on the bottom of the miniature, so you were constantly picking up and looking at the bottom because you couldn't remember what they did. But the rule set was really cool. So it's cool that somebody mentioned it in the chat. Dreamblade was really good too.
Right on. All right, so we're here to our number ones, and since I accidentally might have showed it for about half a second, Marty, you do yours.
Okay, so my number one is basically the game that got me into tabletop games. My brother-in-law came to town one time. He said, "Hey, I'm going to go play this game in a game store," and I went, "Oh, let me go check it out." And at that time, I was really heavy into collecting baseball cards. I was a completionist. When I got a set of baseball cards, I had to have them all. And so he went out and he started playing this game called the Lord of the Rings trading card game. And he said, "Yeah, you buy these booster packs and you build a deck and you play against each other." And I went, "Oh, so like buying baseball card packs?" He went, "Yeah, it's just like that. You try to buy packs and you try to complete a set." Well, I thought, that's very interesting. That sounds like fun. And so I went and learned the rules of the game. And like I said, the movies were just coming out. I love that lore because that's why I like the LCG. You had this great mechanic of you're building a fellowship and you're trying to go down 9 sites to get to the end. And on your turn, you're trying to move your guy down the sites. The other person is playing as the shadow, trying to keep you from moving down the sites. Then when your turn is over, then it's his turn. He plays as his fellowship. So it bounces back and forth and has this great resource mechanic where when you're the fellowship, you can, if you want to play cards, there's a cost. You take tokens and put them in the middle. But however many you put is how many your opponent gets to use on their turn. So if you play everything, there's going to be a huge pool of resources right in there in the middle for that other person to use against you. There were some bluffing mechanics and everything, but it got me into board games. This is what got me into board games, and it cost me a lot of money because I was a completionist, and I was going out and buying tons of booster boxes because I had to have 4 of every card. We had to make a lead. I fell into the magic trap, but it was with just a different game. Yeah. But I love that game to this day, and next year is the 20th anniversary, and Tony and I here, I got to show you. Tony and I have already planned. I've got 2 sealed starter decks, and we're going to stream opening these starter packs, relearning the game and playing it together again.
That's awesome. Now, I don't remember if I played this one. I thought it was called the Middle Earth trading card game. Is it?
There's a Middle Earth CCG.
Yeah.
That is different than this
Right.
one. This one is from Decipher, who also did the Star Wars CCG, which I saw in the chat. A lot of people really enjoyed. That came from the same company.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that sounds cool. This almost sounds like the Middle Earth one because there was this thing where you play back and forth. That one came out like the same time as Versus, and it was neat. It was for sure neat, but then I got consumed in the Versus. But this one sounds cool. I like that idea. It's almost like the board game, the Fellowship of the Ring board game, because if you do like a certain amount of actions as the mechanics are escaping me, but it's a similar idea. Like if I do a bunch of actions, then you get a bunch of actions to do back. That's a really cool concept.
Yeah. And sorry, yes, that is an NC State lamp in my background. That's what I'm graduating. Now let's see, he threw me off what I was going to say. The game that came out from Plaid Hat Games a couple years back, it was like a replacement for Crystal Clans. It was kind of like Summoner Wars.
I like that.
But they had the same sort of mechanic. On the side, the more actions you took.
They do. Yeah.
Yep.
That's cool.
Had that same sort of feel.
That's cool. All right, so that's Marty's number 1, Lord of the Rings trading card game. Nice. So my number 1 is also Matt's number 4, and that is I think I'm gonna get some flack, but we'll see. This is Marvel Champions, and this takes basically. This kind of replaces Arkham for me. Now, what you guys are saying about Arkham, it doesn't have a campaign yet, although I think it's on its way to me. Because there's the...
Yep, there is one.
Yeah. But I'm curious to see how that'll work. But I like that this doesn't have a campaign. And I really love the mechanics of this because they're very Arkham-esque. Where you get... And very Lord of the Rings-esque, really. Where you get the LCG. Where you get kind of those monsters that come at you. They kind of come into the general center area. Then they start to apply themselves to the different players. So you've got to fight them. You've got to beat back Doom or Threat off of this tracker. And then do combat against the boss. So you're kind of playing to these different locations, similar to that old Lord of the Rings co-op game. So it's very similar to that and similar to the way Arkham works. But I like this because the superhero thing's really easy to get into. For me, you can say Versus is really high on my list. But this game works so well as a solo game or as a multiplayer with 2, 3, and 4 players. And the thing that sells it for me is you have to build teamwork into your decks. I feel like more than any of these other co-op games, really, because you have these like people that have to be able to like sort of act as the tank and act as the sort of the healer type of thing, or somebody that's going to manage the threat and another person's going to manage doing damage to the boss. And if you're playing solo, you have to build all that into one deck. So if you're not playing solo, you don't want to do that because then you're kind of too jack of all trades and you need other heroes and players to take on those roles and what they assume. And that ties into the deck building, which, Matt, we talked about with the Star Wars card game, where it's like you grab I don't know what, like an adjective. You grab...
Yeah, right. It's like alignment or non-alignment, but basically,
like
right?
Leadership. Yeah. So I grab leadership cards. Or I grab, I'm having a brain fart on what they're called.
Protection and aggression.
Yeah. So it just makes building the deck so much easy. And I like that it's...
in the 15 cards of your core deck, right?
Yeah,
Sorry.
you just... Those don't change out, right? You just get those. But the reason I like it that it doesn't have an expansion is because it feels to me like even if you play a game and you lose to the character, the boss, that is 99.9% of the time what happens in a comic book series or in a movie or a TV show is the heroes fight the boss in the first 20 to 30 minutes of the show or the movie, and they lose. And they go back, they lick their wounds, they build their decks, and they come up with a new plan, and then they go fight the boss again, and then,
that.
And so to me, that whole thing, I don't need a campaign, because I'm just like, oh, in this issue, it's She-Hulk with Spider-Man, and they're together, and this issue, there's a crossover issue, and like, they had a thing where you can go to your alter ego side and go back to the hero side. That's something that's totally ignored in superhero games, which they address here. And you have like your little arch nemesis that comes along with you in every game is just there to like pester you and stuff, just random stuff like that. It's so cool. And the main thing before I let Matt talk about this is I can play this alone. Like it plays great with others, and I like that. But if I get an LCG game, and a lot of these it's hard to find opponents, especially these days, this I don't need an opponent for. Like I can just knock this out and still get a semblance of that same kind of activity.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, man. I've played this one primarily solo, and it's really fun, and I like the. I guess it's up higher on my list than the Arkham Horror one, even though it doesn't have the campaign. I think for those same reasons, like you described what I sort of feel in it. Like I don't mind losing to what I was gonna say Rhino, but he's the easiest one. But I don't mind losing to a boss and being like, all right, who would be a better hero for this?
Right.
What are some other things I could put in? And then the theme on top of that, like you can kind of tell a little story as to like kind of how it played out against that boss, and it's going to be different every time, the way that the attachments come out for the boss, and I think it's great. I'm very excited to see the campaign stuff. Hopefully it doesn't add too much craziness. I think it's probably going to be a nice addition to the game.
I think it'll be fine, and each of the heroes really works differently in unique ways and stuff, and I think they've done a pretty good job with that. Although I will say, who was it? Captain America is easy mode. I gotta say that.
Yeah, you said he was broken. I thought you would say that.
How dare you?
Well, no, he is. He's just easier.
He's good.
Yeah, he's good.
Yeah.
He's got that shield.
Yeah. So so here's the thing. This game could have easily been in my top 10 because both you guys had it. I put in a more obscure one just to show some love for some old stuff instead of putting it in here. I play this game once a week.
Yeah.
I play it once a week during lunch with a couple friends, and it's exactly everything that you said. It's easier to get into. The decks are easier to build. It's shorter games. It's kind of one and done. There's not the whole campaign that you need. Like Arkham Horror is a commitment.
Yeah.
You're sitting down to play an Arkham Horror. It's really a campaign game to really enjoy it. This is not. This is a one shot. I appreciate it. They took stuff from Lord of the Rings. They took stuff from Arkham. They kind of filtered it down to the best of that stuff, and they gave you Marvel Champions. And you're right. So far, every hero has been totally unique. I still can't figure out how to play Hulk, but regardless, everyone that's come out has been really, really good and unique. This really should be on my top 10.
It should. It absolutely should.
It should. It should. As much as I play, it came out last year, and I guarantee I've played at least once a week, every week since. It's a solid game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Agreed.
Yeah, I cannot wait for the. What's the expansion? Is it not Sinister Six? It's Red Skull.
Red Skull. Rise of Red Skull.
Yeah. I'm
excited to see how they're going to do that. Okay, so that's my number 1, and now Matt's number 1 was my number 10. So I'll let Matt announce it and take it away.
This is going to be a long discussion. Here we go.
Yes, it is. This is why I'm glad this is number 1.
Everybody gets some tea.
My number 1. Yeah, right. My number 1 is Star Wars Destiny. Again, in my view, this is one that I played over 100 games of it. I think because I was logging games.
Nobody's watching anymore. That's fine. No, I'm just teasing you.
I was like, wait.
I'm playing with you. Sorry.
I was like, wait, what?
Where do those thumbs down come from all of a sudden? That's weird.
Oh, no, I just saw them go up.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, man, I played this one a ton. And again, it was one of those ones where it was doing something. It was that unique thing, right? It was like the chase of opening a pack and all the rare cards having a die assigned to it. I know I keep putting all that emphasis on that, right? Like the collectible aspect is a fun thing, and getting this big, cool, chunky die from the pack, and that is associated with a rare, and that little bit of randomness that comes with, you put out this like super strong character, and he's about to roll his dice, and you're like, oof, that's got 3 sides with the gun. Like I hope it doesn't land on that, or that kind of stuff. I know that I understand the complaints about the randomness and the swinginess and all that, but I thought there was enough stuff to mitigate it. I thought the deck building was pretty, I don't want to say easy, but it was a 30-card deck, right? Maybe I'm getting that wrong.
I think you're right about that, yeah.
I thought, I mean, it was simple enough. You're like, all right, I got X number of attachments, I got X number of heroes, I got X number of this. Like, I felt like the point system worked pretty well. I won't lie, like the same things. I've never played it in a tournament. I know that the original release, there was all kinds of. It was like one deck. It was like the Jango Fett build. I'm like, no, that's stupid. I don't want to play that. But like we did the same thing when I played with buddies. We kind of house ruled certain characters that were just like not fun, meta type stuff. But man, it was so fun. I logged over 100 games of it. I played a ton of online games. I think I played it the most via like Skype webcam stuff. We had like a whole league going for a few months, right? That was awesome. So awesome.
Yeah, I
Mark,
loved it too. You know, and they ran into those production issues and everything, especially with the first set or two. That was a bummer. Those dice were so cool and unique, though. That screen printed, they were super great quality, and the quality of that for I don't remember how much a booster cost, but that seemed more than reasonable.
$4.
Yeah,
I think it was $4 for a boost because they had 5 cards.
right. And you got like 3 dice or something.
And one
Was it
die.
die?
That's all you got.
Okay.
As one rare card per pack, and then the rare cards always had a die.
But it had that tactical sort of combat thing I talked about a little bit with Ashes. I mean, they're both dice games, but they had that thing of like action, 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 and then the way that you had to sort of allocate those dice was very cool and interesting. That was just such a cool tactical kind of thing. We had to kind of like cue them up, right, and then kind of warm up that ability, and then be able to execute on that. Was such a neat, innovative kind of way to play, and it kind of felt like it was in that same vein as the Star Wars LCG, not only because of the theme, but because you had those kind of interesting interactions, right, with like Rey versus some spaceship or something, that kind of stuff. You had those weird kind of cinematic kind of moments that were just they didn't really make quite a lot of sense on the surface, but once you kind of played around with it, it made a little bit more sense, and I really like that about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now you're going to talk about the downfall.
Sure.
I got lots. I can talk about the downfall. You start, Marty.
Well, here's the thing, and I think we mentioned this earlier. Number one, Star Wars Destiny. I was heavy into it. I hadn't played a CCG, and again, we're using CCG as a more collectible thing. Customizable card game is what we kind of said this CCG is, but CCSC being collectible, being random booster. I haven't done one of those in a very long time. I was into it, man. It came back to me. It's like, I got to have it all. I'm buying booster packs. And then I remember why I stopped playing collectible games is after I bought my second booster box, and I was good. Well, I got 6 of those. I've got 12. Oh, look, 15 Jedi robes. That's great. It's one of those things like don't need it anymore. But the thing that got this in Dice Masters and was the production issues. It came out, it was hot, and then all of a sudden, I can't wait to buy more. Hey, store, can you get more? No, we can't get any. Oh, let me go online. Yep. Oh, nothing there either. No. And then all of a sudden, when you got to wait for several months, it just kind of dies off. And it's really interesting that today Team Covenant released a podcast. They're talking about how not to ruin a game. And this was, there was a marketing. The day was on marketing, and they said Star Wars Destiny, they talked about this game specifically, they said there wasn't a lot of buzz when it came out. They said at Gen Con, it was like, that's kind of interesting. And that perforated through to the retailers and the distributors, so they didn't order a lot. So FFG only printed as much as they needed. Then like 2 weeks before, people saw what this game really was because the demo nights came out where people could try it, and then the demand shot straight up. Well, now FFG has to wait 4 months to get more product in. Right. It's too late.
Yeah. Yeah, I know on the surface it doesn't really look great because it like used movie stills, didn't it? On the artwork. It was
they were like art recreations of movie stills.
Yeah, so I think
I don't think there was actually any artwork movie stills.
Right, and I don't mind that, honestly, but I think that's something that people tend to sort of downplay. It's like, oh, it's pictures from the show, pictures from the movie, and it kind of looks like it's not, they didn't really invest anything in the artwork or anything. And it was also, I think, focused on the new trilogy, which wasn't as crazily divided as it is today. But back then, I think that might have been, I don't know, for me, that wasn't an issue because I was like, oh, okay, cool, they're trying to promote the new thing. But I think if it was original trilogy, that might have been a little bit better off. I don't know, but I think the Star Wars card game was still going back then, right?
It was, yeah. It was a weird collectible thing while that was still doing pretty well.
Right, and then Netrunner was still going. Lord of the Rings is still going. So this was like FFG's like 5th or 6th LCG style game at the same time. So if you're already into Star Wars LCG, you're like looking at this like, wow, another one.
Yeah.
So I think they're.
And I remember the controversy. Oh, sorry.
No. I was just gonna say I think that probably lent itself to LCG burnout because I don't think we kind of hit a peak there a couple of years ago, I think, where we had this kind of style of game kind of have that resurgence. And now it's still around, but it's still, I think it's kind of died down from that like absolute, glut of those kind of games back then.
Agreed.
And I think, to be honest with you, I think the same thing happened with Dice Masters. I remember our store was heavy into Dice Masters, and then you couldn't get the product. Even it came out at Target some too. And I remember actually I went to Target every day, waiting for a shipment to come in. I would dig through their boxes before they went up on the shelves.
Good Lord!
Because I wanted to grab, because everybody was doing the same thing I was doing. Yeah, give me some booster packs, man. I'm ready to play this game, and I think it hurt that game too.
Yeah. It did, yeah. And I remember that was rare. I stopped buying them from Target though, because what people were doing was buying full booster boxes and then cracking packs until they got the super rares, and then they'd return all the packs. And so if there was an open pack at a retail store, it was like the rares had been cherry picked from it. Essentially, they would just basically, as soon as they open that super rare, there's only one per box. Stop right there. Return all the packs, because I mean they technically weren't open, so it's like this ethical gray area, I guess.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, but I think the controversy, I remember this being kind of controversial, because you're like, why the heck is FFG releasing a collectible game? They have 5 LCGs right now. Like, I thought they talked about how great their LCG is, that you don't have the pain in the butt that is CCGs. Right. And they're like, hey, here's a CCG.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what?
Exactly.
I had no interest in it when I was announced, but then I think it was like, I think some of the Team Covenant coverage I watched, and I was like, oh boy, this is exciting. And again, it was the interest I had of like the half dozen, or I think it was probably 10 or more people that I had either online or in person that were excited about it. And I did like 4 or 5 booster boxes per set for the first. I think I collected the first 2 sets before.
Yeah,
I'm gonna blame Marty, but Marty divested. He was the first one, and then everybody quickly followed behind him.
Yeah,
Marty's like, guys, I'm out, and I was like, oh, come on, and then everybody else bailed. But it was probably the right thing to do. It was a money pit.
Especially when you can go to places online that would buy the cards from you. Hey, I just made like $400. It's like, oh my gosh, just sell it.
I divested just a little while after you, and I used it to I sold just my rares. I think I did the math on it, and I did just my rares and my super rares or whatever they were. And I think I sold about 80 cards to Miniature Market, and with their 25% up fee, I think I got like $860
Holy cow.
for just my rares. And that's basically about as much money as I spent on the booster boxes initially. Sure. So I got all that back. And then here's, just to give you an example of another downside to it, I still have all of this.
Oh my gosh.
This is also why this game kind of sucked, is after a while, it wasn't just a card box, it was this garbage. This is not even all of the dice that I have. This is an enormous box, and I still have, I mean, this is after selling off my rares. I just kept it, because at this point it was sort of like a break and even type thing. But after you get to a certain point of collecting a game with big dice like that, and Dice Masters, like, I got these laying around everywhere, with just hundreds of these stupid dice I have nothing to do with, because they're all commons,
And then you turned that money into Necromunda.
Sorry, I didn't finish my sentence. Then with that money, I bought, like, immediately after that on my Miniature Market account, it's like Warhammer, Dark Imperium, Necromunda, like, not Necromunda, but the Shadow.
Shadow War Armageddon.
Shadow War Armageddon.
Right.
It was like boom, 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 right down the list. I like full on spent like $600 like immediately after that came in. Yeah, that $800 of store credit lasted about a month and a half.
That's too good. All right, well, thanks guys. We're right at about 2 hours here. We're about 8 minutes under, and appreciate you guys joining me on this. It was fun to get back together again. We'll have to come up with another excuse, maybe in a month or so, and.
I'd love to. And I tell you, like I said, once the craziness of all this is behind us, wouldn't it be cool to get somewhere, pull out these classic games that we've talked about, and sit down and revisit them? That'd be so much fun.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to. I'll switch back to the list here real quick before we close out. I mean, I'd love to play Warcry. I'd love to play City of Heroes. I'd like to play that Lord of the Rings, the TCG. And then, from Matt, I'd like to not play Keyforge or Summoner Wars. No, I'm just playing with you. I would like to play the Final Fantasy one if you still got that one laying around.
I'll try that one.
Yeah, I heard a lot of good stuff about that one.
game. It's fun to collect it because I love the games and the artwork and stuff.
So it's on the same topic. Did either of y'all back the Vampires, the Masquerade Rivals? That's also an ECG.
No, I want to try it first. Like I'm not willing to jump in on that. But when it does finally hit, I'll maybe pester him and because it looks cool. I just want to give it a shot. First.
Yeah, I did back it because it supports up to 4 players, and like I said, it's rare to find a competitive, customizable game that supports that many players. And I played with 4 players and 2 players. And I thought it worked well on both spectrums.
Nice.
And I know that there's always going to be that love for the Eternal Struggle, Vampire: The Eternal Struggle. I missed that. I know you can still get it now, but I know that was a very big deal at one time, and it supported multiplayer. That was the best thing about it. But I'm interested to see what they do with this because the people that helped design this game, they were behind. They worked at Decipher and worked on some of the games that I talked about tonight. They worked on the Wild TCG. They worked at Upper Deck and everything. So they have a lot of exclusive games I've played before. So I'm hoping it turns out.
Yeah, that was the one you always heard about. Back in the 90s, there was Magic, there was Netrunner, and then there was Vampire. And that Vampire one I never had a chance to try, so I do definitely want to give it a shot. But right now I'm sticking with the Marvel Champions because that's the one that's going to actually get played.
Yeah,
sure.
But so I think we basically kind of fielded all those questions and things as they were coming in, so that was good. But yeah, again, I appreciate both of you jumping on and everybody watching this evening. And everybody take care of yourselves. And we'll go through here. We'll start with Matt. I know, Matt, you haven't been doing much on the channel lately, but do you got a video or something maybe folks can go watch a highlight of?
Highlight.
Sorry, I don't know.
Yeah, no, you're totally fine, man. You're totally fine. No, I haven't done anything in a bit. I appreciate you having me on here, Joel. No, I'm taking a little break from stuff. Have been for a little. I'm coming up on 2 years now, probably. But just life's kind of shifted, and the group has kind of not dissolved, but we kind of done different things and stuff. And especially right now, we're not really getting together a lot. But hopefully, again someday we'll do something.
Well, you got a different backlog of videos there to check out. All good quality stuff. So definitely recommend folks head over there. Yep. For sure. And then Marty, you obviously rolling dice and taking names.
Mm-hmm. You can go find us at Roll Dice Take Names. That's our website. But wherever you get your podcasts, you can go and listen there. Or I always post episodes on our YouTube channel. So if you just want to listen to the episodes there, and now I am really jonesing to go to learn how to play Hecatoon again since I found these cards. So.
Yeah, I just listen to Marty's podcast and then steal his ideas and then have videos and live streams about it. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
See ya.